All the pieces of the puzzle are in place. What does that mean?
The Bible tells us that the final time of tribulation, final time of 7 years that will begin after the rapture of the church, will begin with a peace treaty between Israel and its neighbors. And this treaty is going to be forged and brokered by the coming final Antichrist. And the world stage has never been more ready for his appearance and for this temporary peace that he's going to bring to this earth.
Welcome to Understanding the Times Radio with Jan Markell, radio for the remnant, brought to you by Olive Tree Ministries. Today, Jan talks to two guests, Dr. Mark Hitchcock and Curtis Bowers. America is at a pivotal point, facing the most important election in modern history. Our two guests unpack what that means this hour. Here is today's programming.
Think of how the world will respond to this, that this Antichrist will be hailed as the great peacemaker. This act will catapult him to universal popularity and power. Now, of course, we know from the Bible that this peace treaty will be a temporary peace. While Israel's living securely under that peace agreement, the God coalition will invade Israel and be destroyed. And at the 3.5-year point, at the midpoint of that deal, the Antichrist will break his covenant with Israel. He'll double cross Israel, and all hell will literally break loose in the land of Israel in the end times. But we can see today how the world is ripe and ready for the rise of the Antichrist. How it's ripe for peace. It's ripe for this Gog-Magog invasion. All the pieces of the puzzle are fitting into place. And all we're waiting for all of this to start, is the rapture. That's the next event on God's prophetic timeline. And it's going to be the first domino to drop. And my prayer today, and I hope it's your prayer as well, is may our Lord Jesus come quickly. May he find us ready when he comes.
So glad you can join me for Understanding the Times Radio today. The cry for peace, the longing for peace, a man of peace, though he represents false peace, is on the horizon. The unbelieving world cannot wait for his arrival. And the nation in the forefront of that entire end-time agenda, of course, the nation of Israel. And as my guest, Dr. Mark Hitchcock, just stated, all the pieces of the puzzle are in place, and probably more than any other nation, Israel wants peace. She is in a setup with that because millions of her neighbors, the Islamic world, wants her destruction. Dr. Mark Hitchcock is a prolific author. He's pastor of Faith Bible Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. He's been at so many of my conferences in the Twin Cities area here in Minnesota. I've stopped counting, and he joins me in part one of my programming for today. Mark Hitchcock, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Jan. It's always great to be with you. I appreciate your ministry so much.
Thank you so much. Mark, I just got to do a little bit of what on earth does it mean, because we've had two hurricanes back to back, and I know that really doesn't have much to do with the Middle East, which is how I kind of introduced this segment. You and I talked a little bit about it off air, and I just think we need kind of a pastoral perspective right now, and I appreciated so much some of the things you had to share. Can you do that again?
Sure, Jan. These storms are devastating. We need to be praying for people who have been in the wake of these. We need to give money to different good organizations that can help with all of this. None of us profess to know the mind of God on these matters. God has his purposes, and sometimes his purposes are very obvious to us, but other times we don't know for sure. I think when we see these storms like this that are happening, there's been two back-to-back now with Helene, with Milton. It's a wake-up call to all of us. It's a wake-up call to our nation. It tells us, I think, several things. One is the world we live in is unpredictable. We need to recognize that, all of us do. And it needs to cause us in our own lives to make sure that we have a right relationship with God. This world is an unpredictable place. We live in a groaning creation as well. And it seems like the groaning is increasing. The whole world has fallen because of the fall of man. And this groaning creation, it seems to be increasing and escalating as we get near the coming of Christ. Bill Koenig's written a really good book years ago called The Eye of the Storm, where he relates a lot of these just natural disasters in America to America's treatment of the Jewish people of Israel and our relationship to them. And right now, it would seem to me that American relations with Israel, as far as our government's concerned, are maybe at the lowest tide in my lifetime.
I agree.
There are a lot of things that are stated by our leaders that we support Israel and we won't withhold anything from Israel that they need. But then when you hear from people who are really experts on the inside of this, they say that that's simply not true. and several leaders of our government were asked a question, how's our relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu? The question was totally avoided. And it was just, well, we have a good relationship with the Jewish people. And so the relationship between President Biden, between Vice President Harris and Netanyahu is not good. We've been withholding things from Israel that they need to carry out the prosecution of the war against Hezbollah and ultimately against Iran. We help some, but there's still not the full-throated support and help that they need. And it could be that some of these storms and things that are happening are because of that. Now, when you say that, obviously there are a lot of believers in Florida. There's a lot of believers in Georgia and North Carolina who've been devastated. So it's not God's wrath on them, but God is simply using, I believe, these storms that are natural occurrences to bring them in close proximity to one another in these waves that we've seen. And I think it has to be a wake-up call to our nation and to people everywhere seeing this, because even if we're not in that area, we know people there, all of us do. And we can also relate to the fact of what if it was us that this was happening to. So I think the creation's groaning as we get near the coming of Christ. It's groaning more and more. And I think it should create an urgency in all of us about our mission that we have as we're sharing the gospel, as we're teaching people the Bible, as we're carrying out all the functions God has for us as we await Christ coming. I ought to give our urgency to that, because these things just seem to be intensifying and accelerating exponentially.
I want to expand a little bit on what you've just said, because the Biden-Harris administration made it their top priority in the Middle East, really to get along with Iran. Hard to wrap your brain around that. They tried to make deals with the Ayatollah, still are. They've lifted sanctions. They're giving Tehran's terrorist regime billions of dollars. That goes back to about 2010. And so here we are today. Mark, it's hard to imagine such diplomatic lunacy as favoring Iran over the only free nation in the Middle East. I see it as literally delusional. I suspect you agree.
Yeah, what they're doing is they don't understand who they're dealing with. Joel Rosenberg years ago called the regime in Iran an apocalyptic genocidal death cult.
Yeah.
And that's about the best description I've ever heard. It's very apocalyptic. They believe their Mahdi's coming back.
Exactly.
They need to pave the way for him to come. It's genocidal. They want to wipe out the Jewish people. They'd like to get rid of America if they could as well. And it's this mullah regime that's running their nation. I think that the leaders of our country, I mean, this is a very mild statement. At the best, they're just tragically naive. They think they're dealing with people who have the same view that they do of life and of freedom and those kinds of things. I think it's all being driven too by global elites, by people behind the scenes who want this globalist structure. And so we're going to try to work with Iran and bring them into all of this. And it's not going to work. It hasn't worked. And that's really what's brought us now to the cusp of a broader regional war and possibly World War III, because we've treated these nations as if somehow they're going to act as responsible people. You know, Iran, it's just been reported very recently that they probably tested a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
They've had some kind of nuclear test. The ground's been shaking over there. There've been all kinds of earthquakes. So our past presidents, Netanyahu, others have said clearly, we will not let Iran get a nuclear weapon. Well, they don't have a full nuclear weapon yet. They're about a week away from having enough highly enriched uranium for 5 nuclear weapons. It'll take a little bit of time to weaponize that, where they could fire it on a missile or whatever, but they're doing the tests. And I think Israel's response to Iran's attack against them is causing them now to even speed up and accelerate their nuclear program. Our country has been foolish in dealing with Iran. Right now, we should be putting all of our support behind Israel and what Israel's doing to support their demolition of Hamas and Hezbollah and ultimately of the regime in Iran and try to bring about regime change there. But we continue to just hold back and allow Israel to do all this dirty work basically on their own with just a little bit of support from us. And it's sad. If we would get behind them, they could take out Iran and that regime, and the world would be a much better place because of it.
Pastor Mark Hitchcock is senior pastor at Faith Bible Church, Edmond, Oklahoma. Be sure to catch his excellent prophecy updates, usually on YouTube once a week, posted every Thursday. Mark, I want to play a clip from one of your updates. I might actually play a couple of them. In this particular clip, here you are making the point, and we're going back again to the Middle East conflict and longing for peace, and the Antichrist doesn't create peace. He really confirms a covenant. And I think you raised a really intriguing point here.
There are grave concerns right now by the United States and by the UK that Russia is assisting Iran with its nuclear program. And certainly that wouldn't be a surprise, I think, to any of us. Now, with all of this that's happening, there's something that I think is interesting that we want to think about for a moment. And that is, Ezekiel 38 says that when Russia, Iran, Turkey, their allies come into Israel in the end times, that Israel's going to be at rest and living securely. Now, I've often believed and taught mostly that I think this will be a result of the Antichrist coming and making a 7-year treaty with Israel. But with what's happening right now, think about if the dominoes begin to fall with Hamas, if Israel's able to neutralize Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, and say that Israel is able to deal a death blow to Iran and that there's regime change in Iran, which is what President or Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel, what he really is seeking. And that all these proxies then become dismantled. Israel could enjoy a peace like they've never had up to this period of time. They could really create this peace on their own or by themselves. And the world would applaud that. Most of the world would applaud these evil actors being destroyed. Now, that would still require a solution to the so-called Palestinian problem, what to do with the Palestinians from Gaza and in the West Bank. But it could be that there's a peace in Israel, their rest and living securely, before the Antichrist even comes along to maybe confirm the peace that already exists. So it's an interesting development here with all that's happening with Israel, all the momentum they have right now, that a peace could be achieved over there, unlike anything we've ever seen or ever imagined. If Israel's able to go and prosecute this war and neutralize Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and really even neutralize Iran, and maybe foster this regime change that's there. So all the key players are in place, and peace through strength by Israel could be a real possibility. And what we could have then is when the Antichrist comes along, and Daniel chapter 9:27 says he confirms or makes this covenant with Israel, it could be the confirmation of a lot of things that already exist that he comes and brings to pass with Saudi Arabia then at that time and some of the other neighboring nations in that area.
If you just joined me, you're listening to Understanding the Times Radio. Jan Markell. I have on the line from Oklahoma, familiar voice of Dr. Mark Hitchcock. Many of you have read his books. You follow him various places, including online. Mark, I love that little clip of you. The Antichrist, he confirms a covenant.
Yeah, Daniel 9:27 talks about the Antichrist says, and he will make, or some translations have confirm, a covenant with the many in Israel for a period of 7 years. There's different ways to take that word there, that Hebrew word. It can mean to compel. So some believe that the Antichrist will come and literally force the parties to the table and compel a covenant. It'll be really forced upon them. We could see how that could happen today because the parties certainly don't seem to want to come together and really forge a lasting peace. So the Antichrist may have such power that he's able to come and just compel that. But the word can also have the idea of to confirm. So it may be that there's a peace in place and the Antichrist comes along, and another way you could translate it is he'll strengthen. So he'll just come and strengthen a peace that's already existing. And I hadn't thought about this as much until recently, but Israel, with the way they're going right now, and we'll see what's going to be the extent of their strike against Iran, their counterstrike, and then will Iran strike back? If they do, then Israel will strike again, and that will set off this escalating cycle of violence there. But if Israel hits the oil infrastructure in Iran, if they have 8 nuclear facilities there, if they're able to get bunker busters and knock some of those out, well, they're creating enough disruption there that there even could be an uprising of people in Iran. Most of the people in Iran don't like the regime.
That's right.
They hate this Mullah regime, that there could be a regime change. So that would be a massive game changer in the Middle East that could precipitate this broader peace that the Antichrist will bring about in some period of time. I mean, time will tell, but it's an interesting scenario that seems to be possibly developing.
Folks, Mark Hitchcock is a contributor to the book of mine that's coming out in about a month, When Jesus Returns. I'm just going to say a word about it. Mark is one of the contributors, along with Jack Hibbs, Ed Heinzen, Jeff Kinley, Barry Stagner, yours truly, and a number of others have contributed chapters to a compilation, actually, of messages given at my Understanding the Times conferences in suburban Minneapolis between 2002 and 2019. The foreword is written by Amir Sarfati, and I'm just going to ask you if you would pre-order it, because it's published by Harvest House, but all the pre-orders are done on Amazon. And that's just how the industry works. And in November, you can order the book through Olive Tree or wherever you order books. But pre-orders are substantial. Then Target and Walmart and those outlets will carry the book, and the gospel will go forth in these secular settings. So the book is When Jesus Returns. And if you'll pre-order on Amazon, again, that allows some of these secular outfits to say, well, this looks like people are interested and they'll get on board. Now, I want to keep moving on here. Mark Hitchcock, so a week ago, we watched many at America's universities. Actually, again, they were celebrating the Israeli slaughter from a year ago, back on October 7th. And this was a headline on Breitbart. Pro-terror activists at Columbia celebrate October the 7th. What universe are we in when people in the free world celebrate tyrants, thugs, and terrorists and put down a free society like Israel? And the world has been for a year, never thought I'd see it, cheering for Hamas, but we saw it again all last week. 1 year later, Israel derangement syndrome, and I think that probably has shocked a lot of particularly conservative Christians, at least in the stream that you and I travel.
Yeah, just seeing people celebrating a massacre,
Yes.
basically, of women, of children, people being taken away, kidnapped. Yeah, it boggles the mind. Of course, human depravity, we've seen it through history, human depravity, there's not much limit to it. But I think what we see, though, it's being satanically energized. Satan's ultimately behind this. Satan hates the Jewish people, hates Israel, he hates them because God loves them. God's made promises to them. That even a lot of people who don't even know the Lord look at this and think, what is this?
Yeah.
How can people do this? It really is, it's a satanically motivated movement that ultimately wants to wipe out and destroy the Jewish people. You can find that many people, though, who are in agreement with that and who go along with that. Really staggering. But I think in our country, it's been a real wake-up call about anti-Semitism is always just right there beneath the surface. And it doesn't take much for it to surface and really come into full bloom. And we've seen that here in America. We've seen it all over Europe. We've seen it around the world. And it's amazing to me the perseverance and the focus that Benjamin Netanyahu and his administration have to stay focused on doing what they believe is the right thing to do to deal with these enemies once and for all. It's tragic that all of this is having to happen, but I think they're on the right path in what they're doing to try to bring this to an end where their people can live in some modicum of peace there in Israel.
I want to play a clip here of Amir Sarfati. And Mark, both you and I have hosted Amir probably on multiple occasions. And he's stating here that this was actually a wake-up call for Israel, perhaps not spiritually, but the fact that you cannot make peace with barbarians.
Ever since the beginning of the war, and I kept talking about it and I kept writing about it, I believe, and hear me out all the way before you criticize me, but I believe that October 7th, as hard as it was probably the only way for Israel to wake up from two things: from the horrific inner division and from the almost criminal neglect of the dangers that we have all around us. And again, if you remember October 7th of last year, Hamas in 3 different waves is pouring into Israel thousands of terrorist gliders, by trucks, by 4x4s, by motorcycles, by Toyota pickup trucks, and they storm, and by foot, of course, and by bicycles, and they storm. At first, they opened a few places along the fence, but then when they managed to successfully paralyze everything along the border, they actually had over 200 places along the fence where they could easily walk into Israel and back to Gaza. And that allowed them not only to kill Jewish people, but also to loot and kidnap, and just some of them kidnap people into Gaza, got back to kidnap more. And that's why by the end of the day, 250 people were abducted. Some of them were already dead bodies, but yet they know that we care about that as well. So they took it, and they took them. And Israel has entered into the new phase of our nation. And our nation will never be the same. We are scarred. We have our eyes open to dangers that I knew about them, but most Israelis wanted to live their life and they didn't care much about Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, Iranian militias. For someone who has a Telegram channel of news, obviously I'm all day long dealing with these things, but most Israelis, all they wanted is just give me some quiet time, give me, prosperity, let me live the good life. And we woke up to understand that just across the border, the enemy that we neglected and underestimated, the one that we could care less about, and the one that we thought it will never do anything big as the rest of them, that enemy surprised us. And when the eyes of the IDF were fixed on Hezbollah, it's Hamas that jumped the gun, it's Hamas that stole the thunder, and it's Hamas that performed the horrific massacre. And if you only knew 2% of what happened, I tried to convey it in some photos, even with the October 7th unfiltered video that I produced, but nothing can really convey what happened to us on that day.
Amir writes on his Telegram, however, this October is different from the last. We are winning. We are not being led to slaughter. This is not 1944, it's 2024. A nation was born, a land came back to life, a language was revived, a flag was chosen. We are living in the days of Ezekiel. Mark Hitchcock, your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, what we see happening is the setup for what's coming in the future. Iran's behind all of it, as Amir mentioned. All these other nations are just their surrogates. They're called the axis of resistance. It's Hezbollah, it's Hamas, it's the Houthis, it's these Iraqi militias. And the nation of Iran is at the head of all this. And of course, Israel's getting ready to hit Iran. Iran now has hit Israel twice directly. They did it in April of 2024, an even larger attack here in October of 2024. And so the world is kind of waiting for Israel's response and then the counter response from Iran. It seems to me like always, when I'm looking at what's happening in Bible prophecy here lately, with as fast as things are happening, the question is, what's next?
Yes.
Israel was attacked. Israel's attacked back. Iran's attacked Israel. Or Israel's going to hit back. What's the next event going to take place? But this Israel-Iran back and forth is going to spiral out of control, I think, pretty quickly. And that will be really the watershed moment, is what happens in that. Because all these proxies Israel can deal with, but it's ultimately Iran. And Iran now has opened the door for Israel to attack Iran directly. And that's going to tell a lot of the tale. We have that going on. Of course, we have Russia that's very close with Iran, buying weapons from them, supplying them with weapons. We have Turkey that's increased its rhetoric against Israel very much by their president, Erdogan. They're one of the Ezekiel conspirators as well. We see all these nations coalescing, the God coalition's coalescing before our eyes. It's not difficult at all now to see those nations coming together, invading Israel when Israel finally gets some degree of peace and safety.
I'll get your comment on one more issue, Mark, because summer of 2024, this is going down a little different path here, saw both presidential candidates removed, although one survived assassination attempts. Obviously still running for president. We're at a countdown here to a matter of days now. The point is the globalists want to install their candidate for end-time purposes, but I think ultimately we're seeing trying to shift candidates and remove candidates and put candidates in. Ultimately, they're looking at the one world government and the one world agenda. And I think that was put on overdrive here in 2024, and even more so as we're winding down from 2024. Give me your thoughts on this as we wind this segment down.
What they want is they want someone that basically is just a figurehead that they can just kind of pour their ideology through. Right now, we have someone who's in the presidency who seems to not really know a lot of what's happening and going on. But again, it's the people around the person who are really forming all the agenda. It's global elites. It's people who have their hands on all these different things that are taking place. There's such an ingrained web of deep state, even when someone gets into the presidency, like when President Trump was president, if he's reelected and president again, to try to dismantle all that. You're the president trying to take everything in one direction, but you have everybody behind you and underneath you is all working in another direction. And so that's what we see in our country right now. And it's so thick and so intertwined, one wonders if it can be untangled in any kind of a meaningful way. That's where the world is headed. As I look at the upcoming election, the person's going to be put in the presidency that God desires to be there for this time. Is it going to be someone that's going to allow America to flourish and go forward more and prosperously as a nation, more independent? Or is it going to be someone who's going to join into the one world system and head things more quickly to the coming of the Antichrist kingdom? God will determine that. And we need to vote. We need to encourage people to vote. And we need to believe, though, that whoever's put in place, it's going to be done by God. God lifts up kings. He removes kings. It's going to be done to accomplish whatever God's purposes ultimately are. And it may not be what we desire, what our purpose would be, but it'll be to fulfill God's purposes. And we can rest in that and take comfort in that God's moving everything. He's setting all the chess pieces into place for the end times. And America will have our part to play in that as a nation. And so God's going to be moving all these things into place for that. And we need to take comfort in that. Some of us people get so upset when the wrong person's elected, but God's accomplishing his purpose.
Yeah. Mark, thank you for those thoughts. I really appreciate it. We are such a pivotal point in history as I speak that I'm overcome with emotion, but I thank you for your words. Very, very comforting. We'll stay in touch, my friend.
Thank you. God bless you.
Say a week ago, we had our 4th Pastors Huddle. It's a gathering of pastors from across America and Canada to consider theological issues, eschatology, replacement theology, importance of Israel, Israel's end-time role, etc. And last week, we had Dr. Mike Dodds, former Air Force pilot, pastor, college and seminary professor, now seminary dean at Calvary University in Kansas City. Topic, a biblical and theological evaluation of replacement theology. And we had about 30 pastors attending here in suburban Minneapolis. And this is in cooperation with Pastor Mark Henry. Our own Pastor Josh Schwartz coordinates these events that we offer at no cost to pastors. You can tap into the teachings from October 8th, 9th, and 10th. Call my office or send an email to josh@olivetreeviews.org, josh@olivetreeviews.org. Again, a biblical and theological evaluation of replacement theology. And what do we have lined up in the future with regard to these gatherings? Why not sign up for my newsletter, print or e, and you can be apprised of events such as this. Now, when I come back, I'm going to be talking to Curtis Bowers about the agenda, and I'll let him explain what the agenda is more in just a minute.
Today, I'm going to show you what they have planned between now, November 5th specifically, and January 6th of this coming year, and I'll explain the details of it. But they are not going to just lay down and roll over. They know we are awakening to the lies, to the nonsense. They know the average American, whether Democrat or Republican, can clearly see they don't have a clue on how to run a country successfully. They definitely know how to undermine it from within. They know how to collapse the economy, create inflation, burden down the system with the illegals coming in by the millions, so they can do the old Cloward and Piven strategy of just collapsing the economy because there's too great a burden on those that are working. And on it goes. But that's what we're going to talk about today. I think this will be very important information. I truly believe there are going to be some dark days ahead. It doesn't mean we can't come out on the other side and God give us the victory in exposing these lies and standing against their schemes. But I would be shocked if between now and January 20th, 2025, not that many months away, major things haven't happened in America and around the world by the globalists to stop them from losing the grip that they're losing right now.
Yeah, and welcome to part 2 of my programming today. I'm going to be joined now by Curtis Bowers, producer of the award-winning film Agenda, which we happen to carry, revealing the communist infiltration into America. Curtis, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Jan. I really appreciate it.
You heard the little clip I just played by you, and let me just set up a few questions that I have for you, because we have only a couple of weeks left until our election, and already America is reeling. I mean, from assassination attempts on a presidential candidate, weather that is just so troubling, and economic issues. I am not sure people want to hear that possibly more tragedy could be lying ahead, just based on that clip that I played of you. The World Economic Forum talks about a poly crisis. Help us understand particularly that clip that I just played of you.
The other side I've been studying for a long time since I was a young man. They always have a plan. They always have a strategy. They always let those that are on their team, fellow travelers, comrades, progressives, communists, they always let them know, here's what our plan is. They always have a plan A, B, C, and D too. They make sure, okay, A doesn't work, we go to B. B doesn't work, we go to C. Back in 1992, when I attended the communist meeting that I talk about in Agenda Grinding America Down, I couldn't believe how organized, how much they strategize, how satanically they are committed to this cause of creating a communist world government. So yes, the clips I was getting ready to show there after that clip from Agenda Weekly was them talking in 2020 of their strategy, what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. It's just something we need to be aware of because our side most of the time doesn't seem to have a plan. We're always on defense, falling backwards, trying to defend ourselves and not moving forward with things. But the other side, I've just noticed, really have an agenda. And this year, between now and January 20th of 2025, I know they will do anything that they're capable of doing to stop from losing powers, to stop the opposition from being able to defeat them because they know they're so close to the finish line.
They, and you and I have talked here, particularly off air, just who might they be? Obviously, these are Marxists, but at the same time, they're globalists. So how do you distinguish between the two?
They fit hand in glove together. If you study the Bolshevik Revolution back in 1917, you see after Lenin took Russia, in just a couple years, it was collapsing from within. And that's when the bankers in America, the Rockefellers and many other bankers worldwide, started giving them loans of hundreds of millions of dollars. They wanted communists to be there. They wanted there to be a threat. They wanted this enemy, one, because they knew at some stage when they were ready to implement world government that no one would be for, those would be the foot soldiers that would implement and be the tough guy that would make it happen. I've studied this so much, but the last 100 years, the globalists, the bankers, the elites that we talk about, very specific people, some we know the names of, some we don't, but they've always funded, they've always propped up the communist countries. Mao was propped up by our State Department to come to power in China. And then the Rockefellers in the 70s said, okay, this is the model for the world, and started pumping in billions and billions of dollars. So the globalists and communists are exactly together. The globalists fund and promote, the communists do the footwork, and they're the ones that rally the college students to come fight for a noble cause, because they always make all the causes they're working towards sound like they're honorable, even when they are not. So it's a great deception. People sometimes see them as different things. For my study, they are the same thing. The globalists want the communists to take over the world so they can sit on the top of that and rule the world, while they have these people that love to kill, steal, and destroy, do the dirty work for them.
I'm just going to play a clip of you here. I think you say it so effectively that the globalists want world revolution for world government, and the issue is always the revolution.
The globalists want world revolution to eliminate America so they can implement their totalitarian world government. The issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. That's what this is about. Whatever issue comes our way, it's about the revolution. That's what the UN Pact for the Future conference was about. The World Economic Forum's polycrisis strategy, that's what it's about. The Democrats' open border, that's what it's about. And collapsing the economy and creating inflation and the conditions for civil war. Congress saying a mass casualty event is coming. Why would they be doing that? Well, they know things are about ready to fall apart. Russia being provoked to start World War III with a nuke. The assassination's attempts on Trump to create chaos and destabilize. And they're going to, of course, say whenever they try it again, especially if they're successful, Iran did it, so then they can start bombing Iran to get the world war going. Hopefully before the election, so you don't have to have an election. You don't have to have an election when you're at war. So it just allows you to, we're just martial law right now. And we got to, by the way, we need to take the guns. And we have the authority to do that now because we're under martial law. Because there's so much instability in our country, we want to save lives. We care so much about the American people. We're in a mess. I'm asking you to join us on Tuesdays to fast and pray for our country.
Talking to Curtis Bowers, this segment of my programming, and we carry his very effective, actually it's 2 DVDs in one, Agenda, Grinding America Down. Find that in my online store. Curtis, and you said to me before we began recording today, this really is certainly the most important election in our lifetime. You said we are really in the most significant time in American history, even more significant and possibly more dangerous than the time during the Civil War. Why don't you explain to my audience why you would make such startling statements? Because you're not saying those things to be a sensationalist or to gain attention.
No, not at all. The problem was back during the Civil War, most people were still wanting freedom. Most people still feared God. So it was a divisive thing that wasn't good. But today, we are so close, and I don't think people understand this as much as they should. I've interviewed hundreds of people that grew up in communist countries ever since I made my films. They come and tell me their stories. And as I talk to them in recent times, many of those people, they go, you don't understand. America is walking the same path as our country. The propaganda from the Democratic Party is exactly what Castro was saying before he came to power, or what Mao was saying in China. We're at a different stage. And Jan, as you know from you talking about the book of Revelations, world government is just around the corner.
Yeah.
If God doesn't have mercy on us, because the technology is there now to make it a reality. It wasn't before. 50 years ago, it'd been so hard to have world government because there'd be so many people outside of your control radius. But the things they're implementing now, if Kamala gets in there, they're going to do the final steps necessary to digitalize the currency, to expand the Supreme Court, to abolish the filibuster in the Senate so they can change everything dramatically with just 51 votes. And they're going to do many other things. But the Department of Justice will go from what it's been the last 4 years, which is a horrible disgrace to justice, to the American way, to being literally the KGB like the Soviet Union had. Someone that is just there to make the citizenry fearful of its own government. That's why it's so important, because with this election, I think by the time there would be another election 4 years from now, they will have long since implemented the measures that make it pretty hard to resist what they're doing.
And yet you told me that as many as 41 million, at least professing Christians, may not even vote, which is stunning and shocking.
We've for too long been dumbed down to think that, well, Christians really aren't supposed to be involved in things. Christians are just mind your own business and live your own life and be thankful you're going to heaven when you die, which all of the above is a lie. We are here to be a light. What does light do? It expels the darkness of the lies. We're supposed to love our neighbor. What does that mean? We speak truth to them. We stand up for them when they don't even realize what we're doing is going to be a benefit to them. Why do we encourage people to vote? Because we know it makes a difference in people's lives who's in power. So we have to encourage others to vote and vote ourselves and be educated to know who to vote for, because that's loving our neighbor. All these things that take sacrifice, take commitment, that's how we love our neighbor. And the lie that's been preached in this fake church the last 50 years is no, we're here to just wait for Jesus to return and not do anything at all. And that's just not what the church was here to do. We were here to make a difference. Yet it's terrible. Every election almost in our history, about 50% of the people that claim to be Christians in our country don't even take the time to vote. And we see just the last 4 years with Biden in there. Look at the devastation to our neighbors, to our communities, to our country, to the world when you have evil in power. We are to stand against evil.
Learn more at agendaweekly.com, agendaweekly.com. And Curtis has been documenting the rush to certainly the communist agenda in America. You know what I want to do, Curtis, is you provided an excellent video illustration of some of these leftists talking. I think they might have been on Zoom. This was actually back in 2020, not a whole lot of difference between 2020 and now, because they were talking about the same candidate back in 2020. I just want my audience to hear the sentiment in the voices of these, I guess they'd be arch communists right here in America, and how they're plotting and scheming and talking about how to, well, sort of steal the election, which I think they did back in 2020.
There's another website that we're looking at that maps critical infrastructure. So again, I think to myself, if we're in a coup situation and we're under attack and under fire, how do we, in the safest way possible, start chipping away at the systems and infrastructure they need to maintain power. You know, some of the stuff that shut down DC is doing, some of the ways we're thinking about this that could be replicated in cities across the country. We've been working on a target map and a framework for scenarios.
And we used software called ArcGIS. If you have a university affiliation or somebody in your group does, you can probably get this for free. Otherwise, you can get it for not very much. But what's cool about this is we're able to pull in other public data sets. So in the purple, we have all the military properties in DC. And then the nice folks from the District of Columbia's city government have made available transportation infrastructure maps and all sorts of other things. If we go even further in, we've got super high resolution. This is once again a courtesy of the District of Columbia, super high resolution, better than on Google Maps, aerial photography of Washington, D.C.
Did you hear that? The communist DC government gave them the maps and all they needed to be ready to shut the city down, to get total control of everything. It's quite sobering.
Understanding that everything that we're doing now in this moment is laying the groundwork for what is going to come. Is there going to be a war? Are people going to get killed? Like, is that on anybody else's mind? I'm guessing it is.
We may decide that we want to go talk to the media. So where are they?
We might have to take over a TV station, right? Maybe we're taking over the local TV station and getting airtime to put out a call for people to come join us. I know that sounds crazy. I've always wanted to do it though. So we're talking about what would it take to surround the White House and have people do stuff. We can divide it up easily with affinity groups. So I want to encourage people to think about who's got the power in your community, map the power, map the opportunities, then look at it strategically and begin thinking about who you would want to engage based on the scenario that's happening. So for us, that might mean looking at blocking the bridges and main thoroughfares coming into the city to kind of shut the city down.
Curtis Bowers, tell us what we've just heard, because it's chilling. And again, these are a bunch of Marxists. They're talking about the 2020 election. Not much has changed, but go ahead.
It was a whistleblower who was on that Zoom call because they joined one of those radical groups and they recorded it so we would know here's how they plan. And I know that from the meeting I attended in 1992 that was 3 days long, laying out a strategy. Here's how we're going to take America down from within. That was 32 years ago. Everything they talked about at that meeting, they have since done and accomplished, and people are still half asleep. It's a war in their eyes. And God tells us in Ephesians 6, it's a war in our eyes too. This is a spiritual battle against pure evil. Why do they lie about everything and do it? Because their father is the father of lies. We are at a pivotal point, and if God doesn't have mercy on us, we are going to head into this totalitarian world that I know what it's like because I've interviewed so many people from communist countries. So I just encourage you all to be praying. Don't be overwhelmed, but you be prayerful. God help us. He is doing things in America right now. I have the opportunity to travel all over, which most people don't get to. And I'm telling you, millions of Americans have awakened over the last 3 to 4 years. And they've awakened to realize they were lied to, and now they're looking for the truth. Well, we have the truth. If you're a Christian, you have the truth. We need to be sharing it. People are getting saved. God is working, but we're at this pivotal stage, good versus evil. And I'm just telling you, they will do whatever they are allowed to do to try to steal this election and then finish the course to complete and total control. I don't know what it might be, but there's so many different possibilities as I read all the courses all the roads they're walking down.
Apparently, according to you, and I follow your agenda weekly online, the mantra is Trump has to go. Is this because he's not a globalist? He's certainly not a Marxist, but he's clearly not one of them. But a lot of people aren't one of them. And yet the passion to destroy this Donald Trump is almost demonic.
It is. And I know a lot of Christians go, well, he's got some issues. He sure does.
Of course he does.
Because he needs Jesus Christ. So you need to be praying every day, God, you save that man. so the world can see how powerful you are and what an amazing difference you make in someone's life, but you protect him. He is fighting for us. That is 100% the case. He has been a blessing to us, whether we know it or not. He is an unlikely source, but God has done that many times throughout history. And he loves this country. He loves the American people. He hates globalism because he sees how destructive it is to freedom and patriotism. And we need to continue to get good advisors around him to give him wise counsel. He wants to do what is right. I truly believe that. But I think this time, if God allows him to get in there and we support him, I believe God is going to use him. We'll all be saying in 4 years, God, thank you for allowing him to be president of the United States.
And you say that these people, and again, some of the people, we just heard them a few minutes ago, but others as well, leftists, they're literally planning for war. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, because like I said at the beginning, they have plan A, B, C, D, E, F. I've read their websites. Go to the Communist Party USA's website. You can see what they're up to, all the things they're pushing or all the things the Democratic Party is pushing. You see this, but they said, if Trump gets in there, we need to burn the country down. That's their words. That is not mine. I go to all these radical websites of the different groups because I want to know what the enemy's planning. I just know they're willing to do whatever. Now, God can stop their foolish plans, expose them ahead of time and everything, and that's why we need to be praying. But they will not let him come into power. Again, God can overpower their efforts to do that. But I believe they're willing to do anything if he is somehow able to get enough votes where they can't even fabricate enough votes to overcome it. But I feel also if he gets in there, they're going to do something to sabotage him. Like they've already said, they might not even allow him to be in there, even if he gets voted in. Congress will say, nope, he's not eligible to be president, so he's not going to be the president. It's just a war that's brewing around us. If you don't know about this, I know it can sound overwhelming, but it is a real battle, and we're right at the precipice of something happening, and I don't know which direction it's going to go.
So here are two voices from the left. Everyone knows these people. First, I'm going to play a 30-second clip, and it's Hillary Clinton. And then I'm going to come back, and it's going to be just a few seconds of John Kerry. Let's do Hillary Clinton first.
We should be, in my view, repealing something called Section 230, which gave, platforms on the internet immunity because they were thought to be just pass-throughs, that they shouldn't be judged for the content that is posted. But we now know that that was an overly simple view, that if the platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter X or Instagram or TikTok, whatever they are, if they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control. And it's not just the social and psychological effects, it's real harm.
And obviously, it's all about control. Here's John Kerry.
There's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change.
John Kerry wants to get rid of free speech. Hillary Clinton is obviously obsessed with we need more control. Curtis, help us understand this.
You have to silence the opposition if you're going to get the people to accept propaganda. Walter Lippmann said that 100 years ago. You have to keep the people from the real story if you want them to believe a lie. That's all this is. Did you understand what John Kerry just said, though? This election is about getting that where we can change. The change he's talking about, what is that? Eliminating the First Amendment to the Constitution. That's what this is about. And the second one will go shortly thereafter. It's a whole new world. It's what Obama talked about in 2008. We are going to fundamentally transform America. And to do that, you have to change the way it has always been. That's what this is. The censorship. Jan, as you know, have already been removed 2 years ago from YouTube.
Yes.
I'm just a conservative Christian man talking, trying to educate people about what's going on. Facebook yanked down my stuff several years ago. This is a war, an information war. They know it's that. And that's why they realize if we can get into office where we start censoring, where your show's done, you cannot talk about these things. My show, Tucker's done. All these people that have been trying to warn and wake people, where they have the right legally, which they won't, but they'll act like they do by ignoring their oath of office to the Constitution, but they will silence opposition. And that's what the Soviet Union did. That's what China does today. That's the age-old communist playbook. Because if people don't know what's really going on, they finally just accept what you're telling them is true.
One of the things you said, which is really powerful and which we need to emphasize, is you say, don't be fearful, but be prayerful. At the same time, you say the country is on razor's edge of falling into all of this evil. And the other thing I think you said to me, it might have been off air, is that once we reject God, God gives those people over to this terrible end-time delusion. And they actually see all this evil as good. But let's go back to, you say, don't be fearful, but let's be prayerful.
Yes. God is still sitting on his throne where he always will be. And we realize what has happened to us is what happened to the Soviet Union, where Russia fell to communism. When Alexander Solzhenitsyn came to America in 1974, and they asked him, this famous writer who had been in the gulag over there his whole life, when they asked him, all the reporters said, how did Russia fall to communism? He could have said so many things, but this is all he said. We forgot God. Well, the book of Psalms says, the wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. We have been turned into hell, or in that road, which is communism. Hell on earth is communism. It's Satan's perfect system because it's killing, stealing, and destroying, which is all he is about. We as Christians need to repent that we have forgotten God. We allowed our country to forget God. We allowed them to lie to our children and say, no, those things don't matter. And by the way, there's 85 different genders. We've allowed this stuff. And so we need to repent as Christians, get on our knees and say, God, please, please help us. So there's always hope in prayer because God is so merciful. He's so long-suffering. He loves his children. I still have great hope that somehow he's going to turn this around. I know if he comes back soon, that's wonderful. I'm happy to go. But I just feel he's doing something. There's something growing in our country where people now are looking for the truth. And we need to pray that tens of millions of people find the truth of Jesus Christ, his death, burial, and resurrection, just like Russell Brand did not that long ago. And I'd been praying for him for years. It was so exciting. But we're just in the most exciting time ever to be alive. It's not an easy time, but it is the best. If you are a born-again believer, you need to be sharing the gospel. You need to be protecting your children, your grandchildren, your wife from all the evil influences that are trying to deceive them, destroy them, and lie to them about the way the world really works. But I want to be a part of what God's doing because I can see as I travel, he's doing something behind the scenes in a very powerful way.
I just strongly encourage you folks, not because I want to make a sale, but I think you need to know the information in this twin pack agenda that we carry. Curtis goes into great detail about the end game of the socialists, the Marxists, the one world government. I hope you'll check it out, olivetreeviews.org, and go to my online store. Curtis, thank you for all you do. I have a particular appreciation for it. I really do, as you well know. And I'm so glad to hear you say that there's sort of a different tone going on right now than what you might have noticed a few years ago. That is very encouraging, at least an awareness level.
That's right. And people are definitely looking for the truth because they realize they've been lied to. And so we as Christians realize we need to take them home where they find out all the lies they've been told, which is important. But then they end at Jesus Christ. This is the ultimate truth that gives us hope no matter where we end up heading. If we all do end up in the gulag, it's okay. Jesus will be right next to us.
Amen. Let me just go out of the program, folks, because we live in a sinful world. It is a world not immune to tragedy, as we're all seeing. It is a world that can bring great grief and pain. And Jesus said, in this world, you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Some are asking, after looking at recent tragedies, if God is so good, why did he allow some of these terrible things to happen? Just know that God loves you. No matter how badly it hurts, he will never leave you or forsake you. He has a plan for your life, and he's coming again, even perhaps today. I want to thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.
You are the love song we'll sing forever.
Contact us through our website, olivetreeviews.org. That's olivetreeviews.org. Call us Central Time at 763-559-4444. That's 763-559-4444. We get our mail when you write to Olive Tree Ministries in Jan Markell, Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota, 55311. That's Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota, 55311. All gifts are tax deductible. We are here to represent the truth and spread the truth, for God is not the author of confusion. We are on borrowed time, as predicted events from the Bible are now all falling into place.